Hello, and welcome to Spotlight On, the podcast that brings together business leaders, entrepreneurs, and experts covering a range of topics. I'm Nicholas Barton, founder and CEO of the Barton Partnership. We're an award-winning executive recruitment and consulting solutions firm providing permanent search and independent consulting services across strategy, sustainability and M&A, data and analytics, and transformation and change.
Andrew Budd, CBE, is a seasoned technology entrepreneur recognized for founding mBlox, the largest SMS transmission provider of enterprise applications of the 2000s, and, most recently, for being the founder and CEO of iProov, a cybersecurity genuine presence assurance provider. Conceived in 2012, iProov launched the world's first deep learning face matching service in 2016. Today, their providing is used by three branches of the UK government, the US Department of Homeland Security, the Singaporean government's National Digital Identity Programme, as well as leading financial institutions like ING and Rabobank. Last year, iProov landed 70 million in investment from Sumeru Equity Partners and is one of the fastest growing companies in Europe and the UK in the FT 1000 and Deloitte Fast 50. iProov is the industry leader in biometric security and remains the only biometric company ever to achieve eIDAS certification. Andrew, thank you for joining me on this episode of Spotlight On. Can you start by sharing an overview of your career so far and how that led you to the conception of iProov?
Thank you very much for inviting me along today, Dylan. To begin at the beginning, I'm an engineer. I've been an engineer for over 40 years. And I always found myself, rather fortunately, at the forefront of technology and innovation. So in the 1980s, I was involved in the microprocessor revolution. In the 1990s, I found myself as a pioneer in mobile communications. If you can make a phone call from the top of a mountain in Italy, you can thank me for doing that. If you had video on this podcast, you would be able to see the world's first consumer digital wireless telephones sitting on my bookshelf behind me here at home. So I've always been involved in things, and I was in new things, and mobile communications was my speciality. And as a result of that, at the end of the 90s, I saw the potential for text messaging, SMS, as a new way for enterprises to talk to consumers. This was a very unfashionable idea, but that left space for me to found a company called mBlox in 2000, which grew on the wave of SMS to become the world's largest provider of application to consumer text messaging. When we sold it in 2016, it was doing 6 billion transactions a year. Along the way, the mobile operators found that they could also use text messaging for mobile payments, which was something they wanted very much to get into. And they asked their bulk text messaging partners to become mobile payment processors as well. And that's what we did. And so by 2007, we were the world's largest processor of mobile payments. We cleared and settled $500 million of mobile payments, mostly for things like ringtones. Did you know, Dylan, that in 2007, the world ringtone market was larger than the entire world recorded music industry? To coin a phrase, not a lot of people know that. Well, unfortunately, it also attracted the interest of some rather unsavory people. And in 2008, some security flaws in our platform meant that criminals could use it to steal money from literally millions of people in the United Kingdom. mBlox was not the only company so involved, but we were the largest. And I was quite a prominent industry figure. I had been at that time served on the board of the independent regulator for the industry, PhonePay Plus, which made it all doubly embarrassing. And I was pulled up on television and asked, Mr. Budd, the role of you and your company in this scandal, were you complicit or just recklessly incompetent? Which was not an enjoyable experience. I was very embarrassed and ashamed. Of course, we were neither. We investigated. We found that nearly 30% of our traffic was originated by criminals, and we cleaned it up within a matter of 2 or 3 weeks. The regulator did a very deep and thorough investigation of us and concluded that we behaved in an exemplary manner. But I was determined that nothing like that would ever happen again. And with the advent of mobile apps and mobile web, the problem became one of assuring that the customer, the person who it was purported was actually buying something, was indeed present in front of their phone at the time which they made their purchase. And this turned out to be an extremely difficult problem. We got the top consultants in the world to tell us how to do it, and they said it was impossible. Well, when you're an engineer, people tell you things that are impossible, especially things that are really, really important to you. is a great stimulus to innovation. So I spent a year thinking about how we could assure the genuine presence of a customer in front of their phone, more or less any smartphone, without them having to do anything, in a way that was both incredibly usable and also totally secure against people who could, if they so wished, steal £1 million in a week. And as a result of that, I invented the core technology that subsequently gave rise to iProov. And when I'd done that, I'd realized that it was much bigger than ringtones, much bigger than mobile payments, that this was going to be the most exciting thing that I was ever going to do in my whole life. And that's how iProov came to be. It was founded on the 30th of November 2011 and began operations in the middle of 2013. So we've just celebrated the 10th anniversary of our commercial operations, and we're just getting going.
And what is iProov and what does it do?
Our task is to create trust in remote users online. I see this and I tell our staff that we're in the process of creating a new human right, because the world is moving to a point at which anything that you as a citizen, as a person, want to accomplish, you're probably going to have to accomplish it online. And doing things online, it depends absolutely upon there being mutual trust between the two parties. So without trust, you become completely disempowered as a person, which means that the ability to create trust in yourself and to get trust in the other person becomes a new human right. So that's what we're doing. We're creating trust in remote users online, and we're doing that by verifying the identity and the reality of a remote user by matching their face to a trusted image, whether it's an image from their government issued identity document or an image that has been previously lodged and was trusted when it was created. You can say that whoever they are, it's the same person coming back. And what we're doing here is we're assuring that they are the right person, but also that they're a real person and that they're present right now. Why is this so important? Well, you can look at this. You can look at this in a number of ways. We're moving into a world in which digital identity is going to be really, really, really important. Identity is the source of trust. But identity really consists of two things. One is it's a bunch of facts about you. So your identity, Dylan, is really a bunch of facts about you: your name, your date of birth, your gender, where you live, maybe your national insurance number, bunch of facts about you. But people don't trust facts. People trust people. So at some point, you have to bind that set of facts about you, that file of information, to the real human being who is Dylan. And making that jump from the facts to the physical human being, the carbon-based life form, as a very senior member of the US government likes to describe them to me, that's what we do. Now, there are a number of proxies that you can use to do this. So you can use something like a password. You can use something you have, like a mobile phone. Until, as happened to me recently, some kid on a bicycle rides up onto the pavement and tries to snatch it out of your hand, at which point your life goes with them. But ultimately, what people trust is what goes on between your ears. And one of the beauties of your face is that it is indelibly attached to the front of where your personality resides. People sometimes say, oh, biometrics, that's scary. I can reset a password, but I can't reset my face if it gets stolen. You can't steal someone's face, at least not without a scalpel and a great deal of blood. The genuine article is unique. So you can't steal someone's face, but you can copy it. And so the real task that lies at the very heart of this process of binding people to their digital identities, and at the real heart of creating trust in that remote user, and therefore at the heart of creating this new human right, is the ability to ensure that you're not looking at a copy of a face when it's presented online. And that's what we do.
Okay, interesting. And so as a biometric security provider, how does iProov differentiate itself from the rest of the competition? What are you providing that's different to the rest of the market?
Firstly, it's about inclusion. So it's really important that we enable people to assert that human right without any particular requirement on special hardware. No special hardware. You can do this on any personal device, providing that it's equipped with a screen and a front camera. So no matter what the brand or the platform or how much you were able to spend on it, it's completely inclusive from the hardware platform point of view. So, for example, we're operating for a number of banks in South Africa where there was an absolute menagerie of different, very low-cost Android phones, all of which we have to be able to operate on. I think at the last count, we were supporting 25,000 different varieties of smartphone and other sorts of devices, and that includes laptops. So the first thing is it doesn't depend upon your hardware. Rich or poor, Android, iOS, laptop, doesn't matter. It'll work on any device that you've got, and that's kind of differentiates it, for example, from things like Apple Face ID, which requires you to have an Apple phone. Secondly, ease of use. There's nothing to do. There are no instructions to follow. Our objective was to enable this process to be completed, even by people who maybe are reading challenged. It's incredibly easy to do. A number of our competitors found themselves solving this problem by asking people to do more and more complicated things, like move their head around and speak numbers and so on. These things all have the effect of reducing the success rates. In our industry, most of our competitors achieve success rates it's sort of 85%. Our business target floor is 95%, and we are typically worldwide now achieving more than 98% success rate, which is miles better than anybody else. In addition, our success metric is the number of attempts the number of attempts that a user has to do on average to succeed. The industry average is about 1.6. We're running at about 1.15, something like that. So, and those are measures of how easy it is. To do it, and how successful the vast majority of users are in authenticating themselves. This focus on inclusion also includes accessibility. So there is an international standard called the WCAG 2.2 AA standard. Got that, Dylan?
I have got that.
The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines version 2.2 level AA. This is a very high level of requirement of accessibility for people who are impaired in some way, whose abilities are impaired in some way or another. And iProov is the only system like this in the world that is certified across all its products for WCAG 2.2 AA standard. Loads of people have got A standard, but iProov is the only one with AA standard. That's really important when you're dealing with mass market applications like governments and banks and so on. So that's, on the one hand, our USP is the incredible inclusivity, but the other hand is security. We are quite simply head and shoulders above any other vendor in the world in terms of our ability to resist the full range of attacks, be they artifacts like photographs, images on iPads, beautifully printed 3D masks like the one I had made and was so realistic that my wife absolutely refused to have it in the house. But now, much more significantly, synthetic imagery that is sent directly in without ever passing anywhere near a camera, which is indistinguishable to the naked eye from the real thing. Our ability to detect and defend against those kinds of attacks resiliently is so far ahead of any other vendor worldwide that we have become the vendor of choice for governments and national security applications.
And on that kind of note regarding the cyber threat of AI in biometrics, I mean, from your perspective, as of right now, iProov is an industry leader in combating synthetically generated AI imagery. Could you explain to our listeners how this threat operates and your unique solution to conquering it?
So for a long time, and sometimes enshrined even in regulation, the commonest way of ensuring that someone was real was to get them to remotely, was to get them to do a video call. That you do a video call with a remote agent, and you would talk to them, you'd answer some questions, you would hold up your identity document, and the agent would be able to clearly, obviously, to see that you were a real person and not a mask or anything like that. And therefore, it was almost as good as when you turned up. And this requirement has been written into the law. Indeed, it started in Germany, for example. It's an absolute requirement for any kind of remote identity verification for financial services. With the advent of deepfakes and generative AI, that kind of doesn't work anymore, because modern AI techniques make it possible to either paint somebody else's face over the face of an attacker, or simply to create what you might call a digital avatar. In both cases, whether there's a real human being under the digital mask or just an avatar, they can do anything you tell them to do. So if you want to talk or respond or move around, the attacker can do that, or the avatar can do that, but it'll look like the victim's face is doing it, and it'll do it so well that the human operator on the other end cannot tell the difference. I can say that with assurance, because we see this stuff all the time. Modern generative AI is now so good that the human eye cannot tell that it's not looking at a real person. So all the current methods used and relied on to establish realness remotely are over. They're legacy. They just don't do the job anymore because deepfakes and AI can do it. The funny thing, Dylan, is that there are some methods of establishing the realness of a person which involve you giving the instructions, move your head left and right and speak numbers. Well, it turns out real people aren't very good at doing that, but deepfakes and generative AI are really, really good at it. So what you've got is a system that actually passes the crooks better than it passes the people. There's a general challenge, so the basic idea is that generative AI and its predecessor with deepfakes can produce synthetic imagery that will either be pasted on top of a real person's face, replace an attacker's face, or will be pasted on front of a naturalistically moving avatar, and it'll look exactly like a real person to the remote. To an agent remotely, or a person that you're trying to have a video call with, or any kind of, shall we say, previous generation machine. That's the challenge, that it's extremely simple to forge people's faces and make them do what you want them to do. So, how do we stop that? Well, there are two aspects to what we do. At the visible end, there's a piece of technology, which is what I invented back in 2011, called the flash mark. What we do is we tell your personal device to illuminate the screen with a rapidly changing sequence of colors. And that illuminates the user's face. While that's happening, we send video of their face back to our servers, where we analyze the reflections of the screen light from their face and the interactions with the surrounding illumination as well. And the way that it reflects spatially and spectrally tells us that we're looking at a skin-covered, live, 3D human face-shaped object. And the sequence of colors, which very importantly is unpredictable to the attacker, tells us that we're looking at a real human being there present right now, and not a recording or a previously constructed deepfake. It turns out, fortunately, to be extraordinarily difficult to forge a flash mark illuminated human face because of the unpredictable nature of the illumination. So that's one half of it. At the back half, we have a fraud detection system that is constantly analyzing all of the millions of transactions that we do every day, looking for telltale signs of potential attacks and of the trail of experiments that attackers use to try and defeat us. And so we're able to identify the attackers and watch what they're doing and learn from them, so that every time an attacker attacks us, we learn more from them than they learn from us. And when you're up against the Secret Service of some large countries, we imagine a building somewhere on the other side of the world with the word iProov written over the door, and you go through those doors, and there are 1,000 people on that floor all trying to hack us. Having that advantage that we learn more from them than they learn from us is absolutely crucial. And it means that when they find some sort of vulnerability, and they will always find vulnerabilities, we're able to detect them having done so and fix it very quickly. It seems kind of obvious, Dylan, but actually we're the only company in the world that does that. And it's fundamental to defending against any fast-moving attack vector like generative AI, which is constantly changing, constantly evolving, constantly changing its form and its method. We evolve. Our systems are set up to evolve as fast as they do.
And, mentioning these attackers and attacks, in regards to your private sector clients, what is your service protecting them from?
I think of it in three major kinds of threat. The first is the compromise of the identities of their customers. Identity theft of customers is a nasty business. Yes, there's a cost associated with it, but many organizations regard that as a cost of doing business. But it causes enormous pain, enormous hardship, and a tremendous amount of effort for the poor individual, for the poor consumer, to pick up the pieces of their lives when their identity gets compromised, when it gets stolen. So organizations are defending their customers from the personal consequences of their identity having been compromised. The second is we're protecting them we're helping them meet their compliance responsibilities and helping them protect themselves against fines. Fines for non-compliance with things like anti-money laundering can be absolutely swingeing. €1 billion fines have been levied on more than one organization for not having been careful enough about making sure that they knew genuinely who their customers were. Look, in a world of fraud, one of the protections against fraud is to follow the money, is to find the on-ramps and the off-ramps for criminal activity. And to do that, you have to be quite sure of who your customers actually are. If you allow people to set up accounts in the name of bogus identities, then they are unaccountable and they can get away with it. And the problem is, this isn't just about crime. This is the way that states like North Korea fund their nuclear weapons program and their ballistic missile development program. So you're talking about huge national security threats to a number of countries which are financed through fraud and money laundering, which are only possible if organizations are not thorough enough in meeting their compliance, and we help them to do that. What we're helping protect them against, for example, is the creation of completely non-existent identities as the owners of bank accounts. And this is something that happens all the time. People either steal or create driving licenses, for example, with photographs of non-existent people on them. And when they have to prove their identity, they show this bogus government ID with a non-existent photo on it, and then they deepfake a non-existent person as part of the selfie check. And now what you've done is you've created an account from which money can be siphoned out, and when you come to find out who they are, you find they don't exist and the money's just gone. The third risk we help mitigate is one of cyber attack. Something like 70% of all major league cyber attacks on organizations take place because of weak access control, compromised authentication. Well, if you can be sure that the employee or partner or supply chain actor who is accessing your sensitive system is the right person and a real person present right now, you block off a whole vector of attack, which can lead to the most terrible consequences otherwise for your enterprise, for your organization, whether it's admitting ransomware or allowing an advanced persistent threat to embed itself in your system and compromise you, your customers, and your business partners. So we're protecting people against identity. We're protecting people's customers against identity theft. We're protecting people, helping to protect people against huge fines for failures with compliance on anti-money laundering, and we're helping to secure enterprises against cyber attack.
And what threats do you foresee further advancements in AI causing, both in the biometric security space and cybersecurity more broadly?
We are conditioned to a world in which we believe the evidence of our own eyes. And I think it's becoming more and more accepted that generative AI will mean that what we see with our eyes can very readily not be real. Day by day, we're seeing more and more evidence of videos in which people say things they've never said, ask for things they've never asked for. So today we automatically assume that when somebody phones you up and sounds like them, or in future when they Zoom you or Teams you or do a video call with you, and they look and sound like the person that you know, that they are genuine. And so when they ask you to do things, you'll go and do them, set up a new bank account, transfer money to it, send an email on their behalf to somewhere else. When they ask you for information and you give it to them, these are all things which rely on an implicit trust based upon the evidence of our own eyes. And what is very clear is that generative AI destroys that trust. You will no longer be able to trust that when you think you're talking to someone over a video call, or when you think you've received content from somebody, that it is in any way real. And that creates huge new threats because people just aren't conditioned to that. What it means, I think, is that this process of identity verification, of authentication, is going to become, and I mean strong authentication, is going to become absolutely ubiquitous when you start a Zoom call. When you'll have to authenticate yourself to show that you are genuinely the person that you appear to be on that call. And when you create content, I think you're going to be asked to digitally sign that content to prove that it was actually, to prove that it was you who created it. That way, at least, if it turns out to be synthetic rubbish or doctored, somebody is accountable for it. Because in the end, crime flourishes when accountability is not there. If you can hold people accountable for what they've done and don't let them hide behind falsified and deniable identities, then there is some chance of keeping some sort of order and some way of tracking who is doing what. In the end, it's all going to come down to determining that the person and their face is not just the right person, but that they're a real person and not a synthetic imagery. All roads lead to this determination that the human being who is taking responsibility for something, whether it's a video call or the creation of a piece of content or some sort of written instruction, is whom they claim to be.
And as a business where AI and machine learning is at the core of what you do, what effect will Gen AI have on iProov's potential to reduce threats?
Look, it's kind of interesting. We've been an AI company since 2014. We were early to AI. I had to be dragged kicking and screaming into it, Dylan. I mean, I'm an engineer, right? So I deal in algorithms and signal processing. I was pretty proud of my signal processing, frankly. So I wrote the original algorithms underlying iProov. And then in 2014, we gave a short-term contract to a very senior academic from University College London, with whom I have very strong links, Dr. Andrew Newell. He came in and spent 6 months showing how our problem could be solved using early AI, using machine learning. Well, I was very suspicious of it, this newfangled technology that no one could explain to me. So we set to solving the same problem in parallel. And after 6 months, we compared our output. Well, my signal processing was pretty cool. It had a discrimination of over 90%. That was pretty good, wasn't it? Well, unfortunately, his first generation, rather primitive AI system, machine learning system, had a discrimination of 99.6%, and he hadn't even started. At that point, I knew that the world had changed. It took about 5 years for his team, which is today probably one of the largest specialized AI and machine learning for image processing teams in the UK. It took about 5 years for them to finally rip out every last piece of traditional signal processing and engineering from our systems. And we have been 100% machine learning and AI driven since then. So we are deeply familiar with these technologies, and they're absolutely fundamental to solving the sorts of challenges that we've got. We use generative AI as a way of red teaming. We never want to be caught by surprise by the attackers, so we continually develop using generative AI, for example, to develop our own attacks on our own systems and then testing the resilience of our systems. So in production, we are probably quite a number of years ahead. In terms of the use of AI through our business, I think we're just at the beginning of a very long journey. We're looking at how it can be used productively across the business. It's quite clear that it can massively increase our productivity in a number of areas. Private equity investors, Sumeru, have brought together a panel of all of their CEOs, and we are looking they're encouraging us to look intensively at how to revolutionize our business operations using generative AI. I will caution there are a number of very significant security hazards that generative AI creates, and it's extremely, in my view, it's reckless to use generative AI without having considered the security risks created and having put in place the mitigations to ensure that you haven't unwittingly opened a Pandora's box of new cyber risk. At the same time, it's very exciting.
So iProov's had great success in the public sector, securing large contracts from government agencies. What barriers have you found to a similar uptake in the private sector? And what is your strategic vision to see iProov adopted by, say, leading global banks and financial institutions?
So we found that banks, financial institutions, and other enterprises have a tremendously varied approach to risk. One of our salespeople have said that fundamentally what we're doing is we're selling dragon insurance. And the question is, do you believe in dragons? And different organizations have a very different answer to that question. So some organizations take risk very seriously as a matter of cultural posture. And I'm thinking here of customers like UBS, the big Swiss bank, who've adopted us. They went through the most demanding vendor evaluation, security review, threat analysis, just because that's kind of the way they are. And they adopted us because not only were we the best, but we were the only ones who were good enough to meet their stringent requirements. So just some organizations take risk very seriously and like to mitigate even the tail risks. Instead, some organizations understand the specific threats very, very clearly indeed. So we work for quite a number of banks in South Africa, for example, and they were amongst the earliest financial institutions in the world to have accurately understood the impact of deepfakes and subsequently generative AI on the process of remote identity verification. So when it came to remote onboarding, the South African banks understood the full range of attacks that were potentially possible in their remote onboarding processes. They hadn't necessarily been exposed to them, but they knew they were there and took seriously the necessity to mitigate them. And then some organizations have actually suffered the risks turning into reality. So it's not just that they understand the risks intellectually, but they understand them because it's happened to them. So, for example, one of our very first banking customers was ING in the Netherlands. I can only speculate as to whether the reason that a huge international bank chose to entrust one of their key compliance requirements to an organization in that day with, I think, less than 20 people in a condemned building with wobbly walls, whether that decision had anything to do with the fact they'd just been hit by a nearly €1 billion fine for anti-money laundering, for weaknesses in their anti-money laundering and know your customer processes. They knew about the risk because it had cost them a huge amount of money. In other cases, the banks in Brazil, like our customer Bradesco, they have been through several generations of identity verification, of IDV and identity proofing processes, and have seen them fail in practice. The level of sophistication of attacks in Brazil is amongst the highest in the world. And so different banks in Brazil have experimented with different technologies and have actually watched them and experienced them failing. So for them, they have seen the dragons. They have felt the dragon's breath. So our task is to explain to those who haven't felt the dragon's breath, who haven't understood the threat of the dragons very clearly, and those who don't take it seriously as a matter of culture. Our task is to explain to them, which is the majority of organizations, why these dragons are not mythical, but are real, very, very real, and their breath is coming closer and getting hotter all the time. And then our task is to be ready to support them at the sorts of scale that they're talking about. You know, the scale on which we operate and on which these problems have to be solved is enormous. There are days when we verify over 1 million people in a day. To be able to do that worldwide, reliably, 24/7, 365 days a year, and to consistently deliver 98% success rates across the full range of devices, applications, integrations, geographical spread, that is a really huge task. And perhaps some can say they do it. We have proven that we can do that. And so we have to be ready to support these, in many cases, very, very large organizations with huge customer bases, and to give them the confidence to deploy this new technology, knowing that it won't let them down. We started this conversation with me being asked that question in front of a merciless camera lens. Mr. Budd, the role of you and your company in this scandal, were you complicit or just recklessly incompetent? As you can tell, I've never forgotten it. Our vision when dealing with banks and financial institutions is to save any of our customers from ever being put in that position. And we do that thanks to the strong, secure, inclusive, resilient biometric verification that we deliver.
Andrew, thank you so much for your time and joining me on Spotlight On. That was incredibly interesting and eye-opening to an area which not many people know much about.
Thank you very much indeed for inviting me, Dylan.
Thank you, Andrew.